His Dark Materials by Philiph Pullman is considered by many to be one of the greatest children's books ever written, some even going so far as to remove children from that statement. The three books have gained a whole host of awards such as the Carnegie Medal, the Carnegie of Carnegies, and the author even got a knighthood in 2017 for his contributions to literature. The books have been adapted into stage shows, radio dramas, and adaptations on both the big and small screen, the majority of which have received praise at least equal to the books themselves. And yet, there's one adaptation that many fans of the series barely discuss, perhaps casually bringing it up for a quick laugh before swiftly moving on and forgetting about it. Indeed, you don't need to look too far on the many forums related to the book to find fans surprised to find out that such an adaptation exists. Welcome to From Page to Pixel. The Golden Compass begins with wait. Yeah, so the first book's called Northern Lights Everywhere Apart from America. Apparently Pullman initially planned for the Golden Compass to be the title for the entire series, this name coming from John Milton's Paradise Lost, but he eventually changed it to his Dark Materials instead. Now the publishers in America liked the original name a lot, and so they used it for the first book, Sweet Talking Pullman, into the deal. The makers of the game were based in America, and so they went with the American title. Okay, so the Golden Compass begins with you riding on Yorick, a warrior polar bear known as the Panzer Pigeon, slaughtering whatever gets in your way. Sounds cool, but God of War this is not. This is a kid's game, so it's not too graphic, which is funny because Pullman does go into grisly detail at times, especially with these Panzer Pigeon battles, and unfortunately the combat is not that complex either, with there not being much room for combos beyond hitting one button to attack up to 5 times and another button to block attacks, and pressing both of these buttons lets you grab the enemy and throw them around. When you've caused enough damage, you can do a rage attack, throwing your paws to the ground. I don't know, it seems like the developers wanted to have a proper rage mode here, but didn't have the time to fully implement it, so they just assigned an attack to the mechanic instead. Considering you're playing as a massive armoured polar bear, the combat should be a lot better than this. Unfortunately, this isn't the only element of the game that has potential to be good, but just ultimately isn't. If the slaughter gets too much for you, don't worry. The pace soon changes as Lyra gets off of Yorick and she goes off to do her own thing. Playing as Lyra is weird because you don't exactly do much with Lyra other than move, and my god, movement is stiff in this game. Anyway, it's Lyra's trusty demon Pan who does all the work. Just a quick note for those of you who are unfamiliar with his Dark Materials. A demon is more or less the manifestation of one's soul appearing in animal form for every human in the His Dark Materials universe. And to backtrack a bit, during Yorick's combat sections, he'll be attacked by humans and their demons. If Yorick kills either one of them, the other dies too, which shows good attention to the source material and is fairly grim for a children's game. Pan's ability to transform is a pretty cool mechanic that makes sense within the world of the book, since Pan can change into any animal he wants virtually wherever he wants. The book has Pan changing form a lot, however most of the time he's either an ermine, a wildcat, or a mouse. In the game you get to play as 4 versions of Pan, the ermine being the one you'll use the most often, but also the least interesting if I'm honest. As an ermine, Pan can look around and highlight areas Lyra can go to in order to solve puzzles, and sometimes those puzzles might involve ermine Pan chewing rope. So yeah, it's a glorified help button. Then we have Sloth Pan, which is the best Pan if you ask me. Sloth Pan allows Lyra to swing from all kinds of ledges, which can look ridiculous because you've got Lyra with a sloth on her back reaching up into the sky, holding both their weight with just one arm. Then we have Hawk Pan, allowing Lyra to hold onto Pan's claws as they both glide to safety over pits and the like. This is fine on its own, but becomes a real problem when the game wants you to combine using Sloth and Hawk by swinging and then gliding, or gliding and swinging, and when it wants to be really challenging, swinging, gliding, and swinging again. Now this should be as simple as a few switches of the D-pad and a few presses of X, something anyone who's played DMC 4 or 5 with style switching should feel right at home with. The problem is, it just won't work. The amount of times I missed jumps because I either didn't change in time or didn't hit X at the right moment was pretty ridiculous, and this isn't helped by Lyra's poor controls and a camera that chooses the least convenient angle and can't be moved, so you're stuck doing platform challenges without a good sense of depth perception. Even so, there aren't other parts in the game where switching forms is an issue, it's just when you have to quickly change them that the problems start, and I don't get it. Wait, is it an input lag thing or something? Because I'd be hitting the D-pad and nothing would happen? Or is there some weird programming gone wrong here? Or maybe it's me. Am I the problem? Yeah, probably. Finally, we have Wildcat Pan. Now as Lyra, using Wildcat Pan lets you roll to evade enemies, climb up certain walls, which again looks ridiculous because Lyra just kind of holds onto this big old cat, and Wildcat Pan can also slide down poles. But on occasion, Wildcat Pan will have to fight to protect Lyra, because this is 2007 and we can't have girls fighting to protect themselves. But this just comes down to a QTE minigame, again, because 2007. Thinking about these mechanics, particularly Sloth Pan, it sort of feels like it's geared towards the Wii, since I can imagine using the remote to swing and glide would be, well, maybe not fun, but certainly interesting. I've not played the Wii version, and while it's easy and cheap enough to pick up, just one version of this game is enough for me. And according to GameSpot, the game didn't do all that much with motion control anyway. No, this isn't foreshadowing. No, I'm not going to look at the Wii version. Don't ask. I said don't ask. Speaking of things that seem geared towards the Wii, let's talk graphics, because this game sure has them. I mean, looking at it, it's clear even on the 360 and PS3 this game was definitely intended to be on the PS2, because while it runs in HD, it's kind of hard to look at regardless of what you play it on, and will occasionally stutter and suffer a glitch, or just black out if you're playing on PC. And yet, there are times when the locations are beautiful. Now, in the book, Pullman centers the scene by explaining the layout and general decor of a room or town, but he's clearly more interested in telling the story, so he leaves a good chunk of the work up to the reader's imagination. The game does a good job of building and capturing the locations, with Trollesund being a particular favourite of mine, its strange grimy beauty captured perfectly in the light of a setting sun. Admittedly, it is described in the book as being covered in snow, and that isn't exactly the case here. It just looks cold, but still, it's lovely. There's even a puddle that reflects the scenery, including the movements of the player. See, this is weird and brings me to a much larger issue I have with the game. I'll explain this simply because I'm no game making expert, but programming a reflection in a video game takes time and requires a good amount of power as well, since the game essentially has to do everything the player does twice. So this took effort, and more importantly, this took care, and it very clearly shows here. So I just don't get it. Most of the time this game feels like it was made as a cash grab, but then elements like this show that at least someone on the team was invested in the game as a project. As you get into the game as well, Lyra has sections where she'll explore a location, whether it's Oxford, a boat, or Trollesund, and this is probably where the game is at its best for a few different reasons. First, these sections let you explore a location as you please, and so you get to take in all the little details that show the makers cared. Obviously I just spoke about this with the graphics, but there's more, as there are many moments which are lifted straight out of the book, faithfully recreated, some of which didn't make it into the movie. This is a tie-in game. Again showing that level of care and, more importantly, familiarity with the source material. Again in Trollesund, there's a part where Lyra visits the witch's console, and this part pretty much follows the book word for word, with Lyra using the compass to identify which broom belongs to Serafina Piccola. A similar thing happens again with the player using the compass to solve the puzzle when Lyra gets taken prisoner in the Panzerbjorn Kingdom, the game faithfully recreating the sequence from the book. None of these are perfect, however, with it being unfortunate that the gameplay in these sections still just boils down to a bunch of lukewarm minigames and QTEs. Now the minigames are really strange if I'm being honest. A key part of Lyra's character in the book is that she is an expert liar, with a good amount of confidence that successfully convinces people twice her age and older that what she is saying is genuine. Pullman goes into detail discussing how Lyra feels when telling these lies, at times being so confident she does so with ease, other times being extremely nervous, detailing how Lyra just about manages to keep herself composed. And there are points where Pullman even details how Lyra constructs these lies. I guess all the readers at home can have a go. So how is this translated into the game? Well, you play a minigame, and the outcome of the minigame affects how convincing Lyra is when telling a lie. Most of the time you'll be in conversations with the character for a good while, so that's a lot of lies to tell and a lot of minigames to play. And these minigames are not very good, to be honest. You've got a matching game, games where you've either got to collect a load of fallen icons or avoid said icons, and one game that is sort of like snooker, among others. And don't get me wrong, strictly speaking these games aren't bad, but they're not good either. Perfectly adequate but nothing more. Take it or leave it, and I'm definitely choosing to leave it. So once again, this is a case of a neat idea for converting an aspect of the book being executed poorly. The final major aspect of the gameplay is the use of the alethiometer, which for the uninitiated is this cool piece of equipment which, using particles known as dust, can tell the truth to any question asked of it. But it's not a case of you saying "where are my keys" and it saying to you "in your pocket, idiot." Instead, the user of the alethiometer must direct the device's hands to its symbols, the symbols used and the order the symbols appear in affecting the question being asked. The answer is given in a similar way, with the hands pointing to different symbols to give the answer. One has to interpret the symbol's meaning both when asking and being given an answer. In the book, this is described as no easy task, with the scholars of Jordan College dedicating years of their life to studying this device and only understanding one or two of the device's symbols. Yet Lyra knows how to use the alethiometer instinctively. I know this sounds very Mary Sue-esque, but without giving too much away, there is a good in-universe reason for why Lyra can use it so well. Pullman explains how Lyra uses the alethiometer, breaking down the symbols and what they mean. For instance, the serpent means liar, the Madonna means mother, and the apple means sin. Yes, this series gets biblical and then some. And Lyra uses it a lot, primarily to find out where certain characters are and the history of other characters, and at one point to pull off possibly the greatest bit of deception I've ever read. Obviously an instrument this important needed to be in the video game, but the question is how. Once again, the developers did a good job converting it to video game form. The questions one can ask it are of course limited, emerging as you progress through the game, but it's the asking that's the most interesting. There are 36 symbols on the alethiometer, and the player has to, just like Lyra, turn the alethiometer needles to the correct symbol. Each symbol has 3 meanings, which one unlocks in the game, some being unlocked automatically as the player progresses, and others being scattered around the game collectathon style, which is good since it further encourages the exploration of the game's environment. Now, for every question the player needs to ask the alethiometer, the player is given 3 words, and has to match the symbols to these words. If the player has found one of the meanings of a symbol, then the needle automatically goes to that symbol. The meanings of the symbols aren't exactly hard to figure out, but are not spoon-fed to you either. While there's a good way of translating the alethiometer to the game, and one that isn't half-baked, I personally didn't enjoy this, and usually after 5 minutes of unsuccessfully trying to figure out the answer to the puzzle, I just hop onto YouTube to find a solution. But if you're into this kind of thing, there are worse brain teasers out there. Having said that, once you find the answer, that's not the puzzle over. Oh no, you then have to play another stupid minigame QuickTime event hybrid of matching button inputs, and if you succeed in the minigame, then you get the answer to the question. The real kicker here is the more symbols you correctly match, the easier the minigame, which means you can get the right answer from using the wrong symbols. Completely going against the rules of the alethiometer and making me question the praise I just gave the developers for this mechanic. I mean, this is a kids game, so I guess I shouldn't be harsh on the developers for trying to make it easy for them, but it does contradict things within the book. Okay, so that's all the major aspects of the gameplay and how they translate elements of the book, but what about the story? You know, the main thing a book is written for. How was the story told in the game? Incoherently! Yeah, right, so, okay. That bit at the start of the game where you ride Yurik for a bit and then play as Lyra, yeah, once you finish that level, you're taken to Lyra in Oxford around 2 months before that event took place, and the game then builds back up to that point. No problem, lots of games, movies and books have done this before, but the thing is, that point is the middle of the story, right before Lyra finds Tony/Billy, depending on how you feel. It's not like the game ends prematurely, it carries on after you get back to this point in the story, which makes me ask what's the point? Then I found out that this level was used as the E3 demo, and given that this game is clearly unfinished, maybe the developers wanted the game to open with the most polished and bombastic level they had? I don't know, I'm just speculating, but it's weird that it just starts in the middle of the story with you playing as Yurik, the character you play as the least throughout the game. And thinking about it, there's a lot of showing off of the scenery of snowy caverns and destroyed ships in that level. So once the game takes us to Oxford, it's not too long before we go to London and Mrs. Coulter's apartment, and before you know it we're on a boat, and then we're in Trollerton, Bolvangar, and finally Svalbard. I just named a load of locations there, not telling you the story or why those locations are connected. And the problem is, this is exactly what the game does. The player is dragged from one location to the next without it being explained why you're going there beyond the occasional few lines of exposition. And weirdly, while as I mentioned there's a good bit of exploration of these locations the player can do, it's not like you find wee scraps of clues here and there that fill in the blanks of the story. Oh no, you're on your own. The situation is made weirder still because of the parts of the game which follow the book to a T, doing so coherently only for you to then be whisked away to another point in the story with no rhyme, reason or explanation. Seriously, if you have not read the books or seen one of the other, considerably more coherent adaptations, there is no way you are going to understand the story here. Given that, I suppose it doesn't really matter where the story begins, since it was never going to be told coherently anyway. Also, the game just kind of ends. The final level you play is the Zeppelin battle, but following that there should be one final confrontation between Lyra and Lord Asriel as there was in the book, but this never happens and instead we just cut to credits. So what happened here? Well, I've tried to avoid talking about the film as much as possible because I want this to be about the game, but I can't really avoid it here. Basically, the film was re-edited at the last minute by New Line Cinema so that it would be more family friendly, since the film was coming out at Christmas and the plot concerns children dying. And also to get rid of the most anti-Catholic, pro-atheist themes from the plots. Oh, and to replace the voice actor of Uric with Ian McKellen in the hope that a big name star from Lord of the Rings would bring the punters in, even though he doesn't do anywhere near as good a job as the original actor Nonso Anuzi. Yeah, that's probably not how I pronounce his name, but I can't do any better, so sorry about that. Still, his voice appears in the game. Anyway, rather than completely re-edit the already unfinished game to follow the new sequences of events, the developers instead opted to cut the final level, since it was planned for the final scenes of the Golden Compass to be used in the film sequel following the re-edits. But of course that never happened. Now, there are a few minutes of film footage in the game that didn't appear in the final edit of the film. Release the world's cut! But you're really better off looking them up on YouTube than playing 10 hours of this game for 2 minutes of reward. One thing I'll talk about briefly, since it's not really got anything to do with the book, is the music of this game, composed by Jamie Christopherson, who has an impressive history of composing for video games. His best work including Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth 1 and 2, Spider-Man Web of Shadows, and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Yep, the Revengeance guy composed for the Golden Compass, and it's great, the track serving more as a way to build and add to the atmosphere of the game. Sadly, the music is the only aspect of the game that's finished, but it's so good the music was nominated for 2 2008 Gaming Audio Network Guild Awards, ultimately losing out to BioShock. One other thing I'll talk about quickly, which I have touched on a little already, are the glitches, which can be wild. So I have no footage of this, but back when I played this game in 2019 to get myself hyped for the TV series, I got to the part where Lyra's in Jordan College, which is maybe 40 minutes into the game, and I could not leave the room because one of the items I had to get got stuck on one of the pieces of furniture in the room and Lyra couldn't get to it. Yep, it was exactly as stupid and painful as it sounds. I had to reload the game for it to work properly. The glitches tend to be graphical, with there being flashy polygons every now and then and really stuttery animations. The PSP version is infamous for being unable to run the game stopping every few minutes to load, and rather than freeze the gameplay, you met with a black screen, so yeah, the game broke the PSP. I originally played the game on 360, but used the PC version to capture footage, which according to Metacritic is the worst version of the game, getting 26 out of 100, a whole 20 points below the best version of the game according to Metacritic, the PS2 version scoring 46 out of 100. Quite a few times I found myself doing an impression of Peter Molyneux playing this on PC, but on level, I think it was 11, things were really bad, the game straight up crashing and the music getting stuck on a weird 3-second loop, which sound like this.
Yorick, gotta stop that fire before it reaches the tin!
Overall, The Golden Compass is a hard game to recommend to fans of the book, and should certainly be steered clear of by those unfamiliar with the source material. Its incoherent story, uninteresting gameplay, and general unfinished state don't help it much. And yet, as I said, there is a lot of evidence that the developers cared about this game and just had to get it out to time with the movie release in time. However, even if the developers had been given the time to polish the game and properly finish it, as well as get the story properly told, I honestly don't think the game would have been that much better, since at its core the gameplay, while a good translation of the book, is a boring mix of quick time events and mini-games, along with bad platforming and a really underbaked God of War clone. It's possible the game could have worked as a point-and-click adventure, which would allow for more of the exploration that's in the best sections of the game. But of course, I can only wish. In this case, read the book, don't touch the game. Right, well that's it. That's the end of the video. I really hope it wasn't too boring for you. I will see you again, and so until then, take it easy.